Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Israel at War, an update on TV7 Israel News. I am Amir Oren, sitting in for the traveling Jonathan Hessen, and with me are two of our distinguished experts and guests, Reserve Brigadier General Doron Gavish, the commander of the Air and Missile Defense Task Force, and formerly the commanding officer of the Israeli Air Force Air and Missile Defense. General Gavish, welcome.
Good morning.
And retired Colonel, U.S. Army Colonel Joel Rayburn, the founding director of the American Center for Levant Studies and formerly a senior officer in the National Security Council and the Department of Defense. Colonel Rayburn, hello.
Good morning.
Morning from the UK. General Gavish is here in central Israel. And this is the 202nd day of the war in Gaza with other extensions. And it all started on October the 7th of last year with a raid and a massacre by Hamas committing the most atrocious war crimes, and such a war crime is still going on. Hamas is holding several dozen Israeli hostages, some of them soldiers, but many of them civilians. Obviously, a crime against humanity. Not only have they been abducted and tortured and probably also sexually abused, but they are being kept in subhuman conditions. And obviously, Israel is determined to do whatever it can to bring the hostages home and to meet justice to their abductors. Yesterday, Hamas released a short video clip in which one of the hostages, a dual citizen, American, Israeli, Hersh Goldberg Polin, was shown. He spoke to the Israeli public, and with the permission of his family, it was shown on Israeli television. Obviously, part of the Hamas psychological warfare effort, and included in this psychological warfare effort was an announcement by Hamas, but uncorroborated, that the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar has left for a short time his tunnel hideout and has gone to see his fighters above ground. Again, one should look at this report quite skeptically. General Gavish, we have ongoing operations in Gaza, but the major operation for which the Israeli Defense Forces are preparing is in Rafah. And yesterday, the chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, and the chief of Shabak, the Internal Security Agency, Ronen Bar, flew to Cairo to coordinate with their Egyptian counterparts the operation. Of course, the Egyptians are not taking part in it, but they should be kept abreast of any operation which could reach almost as far as their own border, the so-called Philadelphia route. Also, they should be relieved to know that there is no intention to push any Palestinian refugees out of Gaza and into Egypt. How far advanced are the preparations to start this operation in Rafah?
Well, Amir, allow me to start with the short clip that was released yesterday by the Hamas. You mentioned it a few minutes ago, and it is, once again, we see how cynical is this organization. Of course, it is not a mistake or randomly that they picked this young man to be in this movie. We just heard lately about his mother, that was one was chosen as one of the more 100 influential women in the United States. So I'm sure that of course, they saw it, and once again, they are behaving in a very, very cynical and cruel way. This is the organization. This is the way of their behavior. We are really dealing here with the evil itself. Maybe the students in the United States and what we are seeing there, they would. I hope something would move in the way of thinking once they would see this movie or this clip. Sorry. Going back to your question, it has been a while that the IDF is preparing itself to this mission in Rafah. It was not a secret. It was mentioned again and again by our government leader, Bibi Netanyahu, and by the chief of the armed staff, General Herzi Halevi, for quite a long time. They are talking about it, that Rafah would be the next step for this war. So the IDF is preparing itself. We have to remember that this is a very complex area with a lot of civilians, a lot of other considerations that the IDF have to take while he's entering this area of Rafah. But this is something that we talked about it again and again. It is a must-do. Basically, this is the last place for the Hamas terrorists. The last 4 battalions are deployed in this area, probably the hostages and the leaders of the Hamas. So there is no question that this should be the next place for the IDF during this war. Remembering that the 2 main goals of this war were not yet fully achieved, and this would be a big step toward achieving those goals.
Colonel Reben, 2 questions for you. And unsurprisingly, we'll start with the first one, even though Israelis have a tendency to be too clever and start with the second of 2 questions. Politically, the moral asymmetry which General Gavish pointed to, where Israel is being blamed whatever it does, while Hamas almost gets a free ticket because what can you do? It's a terrorist organization. What can you expect from it? And we see the student demonstrations in the United States during a presidential election season, where President Biden is trying to shore up his support even from leaders of the so-called squad of far-left, quote-unquote, progressive Democrats in Congress. And this is while Israel is trying to get the administration's approval for the operation in Rafah, in addition to the Egyptian acquiescence. Is that going to have an impact on the considerations of the administration when Israel presents its final plan for the Rafah operation?
Amir, in 1968, the Democratic Party held its national convention to nominate presidential candidate in Chicago, and all hell broke loose, and it was quite a chaotic scene, as everyone famously knows now. The Democrats, 120 days from now, the Democrats are once again going to be holding their national convention in Chicago at precisely the time across the summer that I think you'll probably see an explosion of the campus protests and riots and instability from what is essentially effectively a pro-Hamas organized youth movement that obviously has a lot of now money coming in from somewhere to fund it. So I this is going to take over the airwaves in the United States across the summer, and it's going to be pretty sporty, I think, in some of the U.S. cities and on the campuses between now and then. It's a perfect storm. Domestically in the United States, this is going to be the issue, and I think it's probably going to crowd out a lot of other geopolitical issues. It will be somewhat detached, as you say, from the actual situation on the ground. Concerning the idea that Israel is always held responsible for its response to Hamas provocations as opposed to the provocations themselves, but this is the same dynamic that gets applied to the Iranian regime, where the Iranian regime appears to be free to attack anyone it chooses, but then the scrutiny comes on those who respond, and the responsibility for containing escalation comes on those that the Iranian regime attacks. So I think these situations are in parallel. In addition, you can see, just as a military analyst, I can kind of see, and I think military analysts can kind of see to the end of the military phase of the Gaza conflict. And there'll come a time where, tactically speaking, the tempo of operations is low, and that means that in geopolitical terms, you would move on to other issues. I think there are going to be some intervening issues that will begin to crowd out the Gaza issue, both the U.S. domestic political one, but also I think there's likely to be an intensification of the conflict in Ukraine over the summer. And then there are the still unresolved clashes with the Iranian regime's axis of resistance in the Red Sea and in Lebanon and in Iraq. And I think these more and more are going to draw attention. But in terms of U.S. politics, it's going to be quite a clash between the Free Palestine movement in the United States and the authorities during this election season.
Okay, the other question has to do with your military experience and, in general, the experience of the U.S. armed forces over the last couple of decades in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in Syria against ISIS. The Rafah operation has been publicly defined as aimed as breaking the bones of the 4 Hamas battalions and hopefully finding the leadership of Hamas, Sinwar, and the rest, and releasing the hostages. But what does it really mean to eradicate the command structure of such a brigade consisting of 4 battalions when they later sneak back into various areas? And you have experienced it in Fallujah in Iraq and in Afghanistan, in Helmand province and other places. It never really ends. So when you say the higher intensity phase of operations in Gaza will probably end, this would not mean the end of the war, of the Israeli effort to fight Hamas.
No, it wouldn't. And then it'll move to a different phase, a much lower intensity phase, and one that's marked more by stabilization operations than things that look like military operations. It will look much more like an intelligence-driven, almost law enforcement type of operation, where you're developing intelligence to try to hunt down what are essentially clandestine cells that are part of a network, as opposed to trying to destroy an army in the field, which is essentially what Hamas had, what Al Qaeda in Iraq had, what the Taliban had at various times. Now, the reason that you can be very successful at destroying an army in the field and then fail at fully stamping it out as a clandestine network or as a terrorist group after that is because you have to stabilize the territories from which you drive them as an army in the field, and you have to actually put something in their place in terms to provide security, to fill a security vacuum, a political vacuum, a governance vacuum, and an economic vacuum. And if you don't do that, then the conditions will remain for them to return. And then it really is just like you're sweeping water out with a broom that's just going to run back. That's why really it wasn't in Iraq. We did very effective military operations and security operations against Al Qaeda in Iraq year after year after year, but it didn't stick. It didn't really get momentum and become irreversible until there was the parallel movement of the awakening, the tribal awakening in Iraq, in order to fill the local security and governance vacuum in Anbar and in central Iraq. And that's when it took off. If there's not something like that with Hamas, then yeah, sure, you can expect that the conditions will be ripe for return. But I think everyone in this scenario knows that. I think Israel knows that. I think the Palestinians themselves know that, and I think the Arab states know that. The United States, I think, knows that as well. So you'll see more and more. There will be a need. There is a vacuum in Gaza, and it'll have to be filled by something constructive that can ensure that Hamas can't return and seize control again and become an army in the field again.
General Gavish, your own branch of the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israel Air Force, is now carrying out the brunt of the missions in the north, on the northern front, the exchange between Israel and Hezbollah. In both dimensions, the aircraft, both manned and unmanned, are striking Hezbollah targets, again, manned and unmanned, sometimes hitting high-value targets. Defense Minister Gallant yesterday said that fully one half of the Hezbollah key officers in the south has been eliminated, and the other half are hiding. And the Air and Missile Defense Corps is intercepting almost all of the projectiles launched at Israel. Can you please tell us, now that the entire world is seeing how effective the air and missile defense that Israel has built over the last 3 decades is, how do you recruit and retain personnel for the air and missile defense? It used to be, and maybe still is, that whoever joins the Air Force wants to become a fighter pilot, or at least a helicopter pilot, a navigator, or a transport pilot. But some people are washed out of the Air Academy, and then they are offered the choice of becoming drone operators or air and missile defense officers. What is the quality of personnel that your corps is now managing to draw and become such effective operators of batteries and battalions?
Well, you know, Amir, this is basically the history, but it is completely changed in our days. In the last 10 years, the ratio of young men and women wanting to be part of the Israeli air defense is probably always the first or the second branch within the IDF that the new enlisted are asking to join to. So it is in a very, very high demand. Of course, after what we saw, the way that this organization was effective during the last war, and this is something that, of course, everyone sees it with the Iron Dome, with the David Sling, and with the Arrow. So in the last few years, and mainly now, the amount of people that are, as I said, wanting to be part of this organization is very high. So there is no issue there. Of course, what is really unique in this organization is the combination between technology from the one hand and being a fighter from the other. We're talking about really the state-of-the-art technology. When you are part of the Aero unit, you intercept in space. When you are part of the David Sling, you intercept all kinds of different targets. If you are in the Iron Dome, the amount of rockets that were intercepted are by the thousands. So, you know, it is something that people would like to be part of it. It is probably, and unfortunately, the most experienced air defense force in the world.
But if you could take us into the nerve center, the command and control position for the firing units, the men and women staffing it probably have to be quite apt at quick decision making, because if they act too slow, the target they are protecting would be hit and maybe destroyed. If they act too fast, maybe they will waste very expensive interceptor missiles. So what sort of people are you looking for?
Well, you described it, very good, Amir. This is a decision that have to be taken in a matter of seconds. Of course, if you are very short to the border, like it is in the Gaza Strip or in the south part of Israel, and also in the northern part of Israel, on those areas which are very close to the border, the reaction time is very, very quick, and you are looking for someone who can be very focused on his mission, very quick decision taker, and very brave. Because you could make very hard mistakes, and you don't want to do it. There are all kinds of challenges up in the air. We have to remember that the air is full of UAVs, helicopters, airplanes, and within all of those, you have to make the decision to and shoot down the right target. And this is something that should be done in a very professional way. So the people of this organization should be the ones that could make quick decisions, to be brave, and to be able to shift from one mission to the other in a very quick way.
And amazingly enough, over these almost 7 months, there has been no blue-on-blue incident in the skies over Gaza, Israel, and Lebanon. And this, of course, is also to the credit of the control organization of the Air Force and the operational staff, because one would have thought that with so many, as you said, planes, drones, and missiles in the air, both friend and foe, at one time, one of our own fighters or missile batteries would regrettably shoot down one of the other units. But it has not happened, and it is quite commendable. Now, Colonel Rabin, from your experience, when the U.S. Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, and the Joint Force in general, when they try to get their lessons learned from both the Ukraine and Gaza, how do they look at what the IDF is doing? We here are emotionally involved, so maybe we're not detached enough to dissect what is happening. But in your view, when they see how the IDF fights, and either compare it to your own forces or to what the Ukrainians are trying to do vis-a-vis Russia, what's the general view?
Well, I think the U.S. military is learning a lot from both conflicts and is applying some of those lessons. But also, the U.S. military has had a hand in designing the forces that are defending in both Ukraine and Israel. CENTCOM has had a very close role, including with Doron, and the U.S. component of NATO has had a very close role in Ukraine and in advising and in providing technical assistance and munitions and so on and training. But I think in terms of strategy, though, Amir, what strikes me, I think something happened on the night of April 13th, 14th that is strategically significant that hasn't yet emerged fully. People, I don't think, fully understand it yet. If you recall, look, some of the power that the Iranian regime and the axis of resistance have been projecting is that no one was sure exactly how powerful they were. No one was sure whether they could unleash a barrage, whether that's from Lebanon or Syria or Iran itself, that could overwhelm Israeli defenses or could overwhelm U.S. defenses someplace or some other U.S. ally in the region. And similarly to, if you recall, it was in the mid-1980s, 1985, when President Reagan announced that there would be a massive investment in the Strategic Defense Initiative, which offered the prospect to the United States of a technological answer to being able to defeat a Soviet first strike without the Soviets being able to defeat a U.S. first strike. And that changed the strategic balance, just the idea of it changed the strategic balance so greatly that it led ultimately to the Soviet Union having to capitulate in the Cold War and then collapse in short order. I think something similar happened here, which is that I think there's been a demonstration that indicates that it's likely that the Iranians don't have the power, they don't have the quality of missiles and drones that can penetrate Israeli defenses, that the Israeli defenses have advanced so far that there is the likelihood now, or people will think it's possible that Israel could actually defeat an axis of resistance first strike from Iran itself. Obviously, that's what happened on April 13th and 14th, or potentially from Lebanon, which is the only other place that they could unleash something of that scale that would be a problem for Israel. That means there has to be a strategic recalculation in this regional conflict, in this potential matchup between the Iranian regime on the one side and Israel and its allies on the other. And I think that's something that people need to be taking advantage of, that recalculation, because it seems clear that the power differential between the United States and Israel and their allies on one side and the axis of resistance on the other is so vast that the Iranian regime is essentially writing checks that it can't cash if it comes to a confrontation.
And in addition to the local Star Wars, there is also a local Store Wars, the stocks that Israel will now have in store, thanks to the action by the U.S. Congress and President Biden in approving the aid package will, of course, give it a lot of staying power and stamina. Thank you very much, retired Colonel Joel Rabin and Reserve Brigadier General Doron Gavish. You will probably be back with us in a future update very shortly. For the time being, this has been Israel at War, an update. Shalom from Jerusalem.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.